afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Belfast National Library. It's good to see so many of you here. So before I get started, I'd just like to run through some housekeeping. Don't take the stairs in this building, it exhausts you, puts you out of bed. Okay, not nerves, it's stairs, okay. So before we get started, we don't have a fire drill scheduled today, so if the alarm does sound, we will need to evacuate. So I will be at the back of the room, so please follow me. I will be the first and fastest out. So follow me and I'll lead you to our assembly point across the street from the library. Toilets are located on the ground floor, the gents' toilets on the second floor. And also, if I could please ask that your phones and devices are set to silent or vibrate. Nobody wants to be that person in a crowd this size. All right. Today's event is being live streamed and will be available to view on the Libraries NI YouTube channel at a later date. So if you did have friends who weren't able to make it today, do tell them to keep an eye out for that. So we are now nearly halfway through Book Week 2025, a partnership between BBC NI and Libraries NI, celebrating all things books, reading and libraries. This year is extra special. It's our 10th anniversary. And for a decade, Book Week NI has been uniting communities, schools, families and workplaces across Northern Ireland in a shared celebration of the joy and importance of reading. It has grown into one of Northern Ireland's key cultural events, inspiring thousands of people to pick up a book, discover new authors, and share the magic of reading. As you can imagine, we have a fully packed programme of events in libraries across Northern Ireland, including author Joe Spain in Antrim, Ellie Griffiths in Hollywood, and Brian McGilloway in Strabane, amongst others. The full programme can be viewed on the Libraries NI website. We rely on your feedback to help us to continue to offer and improve these events. So on the back of the seats in front of you, you'll see a QR code. We also have some written evaluations as well. So if you could please take a few seconds before you leave today to complete that, we would very much appreciate it. Now, however, we are delighted to welcome author Glenn Patterson and journalist Eamonn Mallie. Multi-award-winning journalist Eamonn Mallie is one of Northern Ireland's most respected and well-known media personalities. He has worked in print, radio and television for over 50 years and was reporting on the ground as the Troubles unfolded. Eamonn has interviewed countless world leaders, including President Bill Clinton, Prime Ministers Margaret Thatcher and Tony Blair, President Nelson Mandela, Princess Diana, and architects of the Northern Ireland peace process, John Hume and David Trimble. In addition to reporting on current events, Eamonn has also authored several books, including his memoir, Eyewitness to War and Peace, which was released just last year. Glenn Patterson wears many hats, all with style, as you can imagine. Author, documentary filmmaker, playwright, professor, fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, director of the Seamus Heaney Centre at Queen's, and BAFTA nominee. He has authored over 18 books in total, both fiction and non-fiction, with his most recent being The Northern Bank Job, the true story of the biggest bank heist in British and Irish history. So you're in for a real treat today. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Can I just start by apologising that all those people who you interviewed, starting with the presidents and coming down, it's like reading the league tables on a Saturday and you've got to go down 4 divisions to get to the Irish League, and now you're with me.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah,
that's
happy to meet you.
Thank you very much indeed. You know, there are very few things in Northern Ireland with which I'm not familiar in terms of the Troubles. I know you courteously mentioned presidents and all that, and prime ministers, but I interviewed killers too, on all sides over the years, you know. And I was just saying to Glenn a moment ago, I wish people would stop yapping in Northern Ireland And thank the God for where we are today. When you look around the world and see what's going on, all this sniping at the executive. Look at the government in London. Look at what's going on in Germany. Look at what's going on in France. Is it 7 prime ministers under Macron? Italy's gone to the right. Look what's going on in America. I'll say no more about America. My passport or my visa might be in danger. But it's just, we forget where we are and we forget about where we were so quickly. Anyhow, I'm here to interview you or ask you a few questions, Glenn. That's what I do, ask questions. And thank you all for coming. Nice to see a good turnout. Firstly, Glenn, did we have to have another book about the Northern Bank robbery? There was exhaustive coverage of it. In fact, I haven't worn this suit since way back then.
I think it's come back in again, so that's okay.
Yeah.
I was going to say, as Eamonn was saying, we have to have all this sniping. I was just thinking that is a great advert for not reading my book, or at least 25 pages towards the end of my book. Did we have to have another book about the Northern Bank job? My editor thought we did. So as simple as that, I was in 2021, I made a podcast. I didn't know I was making a podcast. What I thought I was making was a 10-part radio series for Radio 4. I don't know if any of you are devotees of World at 1 on Radio 4, but every day at 1 o'clock, I have to be sitting down with my lunch as the World at 1 comes on. And I listen to the news, I have my lunch, and then I go back to work. But at between 1:45 and 2 o'clock, there's a 15-minute slot, which is usually a 5-part series or sometimes spread over 2 weeks, a 10-part series. And I often listen to those. And I got the invitation to be part of one of those series on the Northern Bank robbery. And I thought I would be interested. I'd tried to write a screenplay shortly after the robbery happened. And so I thought I'd be interested in doing that series. By the time we finished the series and it came out, everything automatically was going straight to BBC Sounds. So what had, in my mind, been 10, 14 minutes on Radio 4, 1:45 to a minute before the news every day, turned into a podcast. So that was what I did. I wrote the podcast. The script of that was probably about 16,000 words. And my editor thought that there might be a book in the material that wasn't included for whatever reason in that podcast. So that's the long answer to your very first short question. 3 more questions, and I think we'll have seen out the hour.
Right, I spend my life editorializing. I'm writing non-stop, whether it's for television, for radio, for social media, whatever. So I have to think all the time editorially, and I've got to be legally aware all the time. When I saw this book here, of which we speak today, The Northern Bank Job, the word job jumped out at me. Why did you call it the Northern Bank job?
Because that's how everyone referred to it. It was the term that also it was the name of the podcast, but it was variously referred to as the Northern Bank robbery, the Northern Bank heist, but most colloquially it was the Northern Bank job. And one of the things I thought about it was that when it first happened, and by the way, we're talking here today. 3 days after the robbery at the Louvre?
Yes.
76 million pounds, I think, is the value that they've put on the jewels that were taken out of the Louvre in 8 minutes flat. And it's interesting to hear how that robbery is being talked about. It's not just being talked about as a jewellery robbery. It's not just being talked about as a robbery at one of the most famous museums, possibly the most famous museum in the world. But it's been talked about as though it is a reflection on or says something about France at this moment. Now, whether it does say something about France at this moment or not doesn't alter the perception that it is feeding into this sense that France is, as you just said, 7 prime ministers under Macron, that things are not just quite right.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because at the time of the bank robbery, there was considerable political instability here. Mm-hmm. We hadn't consolidated mm-hmm. the political structure per se. And secondly, policing hadn't been really pinned down at that stage, all the reforms, etc. Do you think that those factors made or decided for certain people to take advantage of the situation with the bank?
I mean, yes, you're right about the timing of it. So it was the 20th of December, 2004. It was a Monday night. It was the last Monday before Christmas. It was the Monday after the busiest shopping weekend mm-hmm. in the year. And I mean, many of you will know this. I know will remember the robbery, but just for a little bit of context to it, the robbery occurred in the Northern Bank on the corner of Donegal Square West and Wellington Street, crucial to the robbery. And it occurred particularly, very specifically, in the basement cash centre. And the basement cash centre was where all the money that had come in the previous weekend would be.
So the bank was full to the gills.
Full to the gills
Stuffed to the gills
money. With money. So there was that. Just a few weeks before, attempts to get power sharing up again, because it was one of those occasions when the Assembly was not sitting, and the talks between Sinn Féin, the DUP, mostly between Sinn Féin, DUP, Irish and British governments with some input from the United States, those had just broken down a few weeks before over what was in shorthand referred to as the sackcloth and ashes demand by Ian Paisley, that the IRA had not only to give up their guns, but they had to do it in such a way as
photographically.
Photographically. Mm-hmm. So that was the moment that this had happened. And as you say, policing was still in transition, and so that gives you the timing of it.
We've got so much to cover, Dan, so we've got to keep moving, and you've got to keep your answers as briefly as possible.
Well, I'll see what I feel it needs.
Okay.
Why don't we do that?
I'll be the arbiter.
Well,
anyway,
see how that goes.
But, Glenn, the bottom line is, essentially there were two protagonists in the bank, in the very area where the bulk of the money seems to have been located. In a sentence, just could you outline their roles in the bank?
So the cash centre in the Northern Bank had a large, the safe, where most of the money was held, had two operators, two keys, two key holders, and that was the key holders were allocated or on a rota every shift. And on the Monday night in question, the key holders were Kevin McMullen, who was the number one key holder, and Chris Ward.
Kevin was an assistant bank manager.
He was an assistant bank manager, and Chris Ward's role was supervisor. He was supervisor. Yeah. So the number one key holder was always the most senior member of staff.
Now, the relevance of the keys grows and grows when it comes to the court case, when Chris Ward appeared in court, because there was a lot of discussion about the keys and who had the keys and who had the right to have the keys and all that type of thing, if I remember correctly. In fact, Judge McLaughlin dismissed all the talk about this at the end of the day, from what I read.
It'll be chapter 8 where that happens, but there's some chapters on the way up to that.
Now, come what may, you had two families
Yeah.
You had the Wards living in West Belfast,
Yeah.
and you had the McMullins living out in South
Loughlin
Island, South Down. Now, take us through the fatal evening when there was a knock on Ward's door. Paint the picture.
So on the evening of the 19th of December, a Sunday night, Chris Ward was sitting at home with his dad. They were watching football. His brother and his brother's girlfriend were upstairs, as was his mother. And there was a knock at the door. Chris got up to answer the door, and there was a guy standing there, and he said, "Chris, I'm here to see you about Celtic." Chris was involved with Glasgow Celtic Supporters Club.
As he was with Casement Park.
Yes. And in fact, that Sunday evening, he was supposed to have gone to work at the Casement Park Social Club, but didn't go into work, didn't feel like it, so wasn't at work that Sunday evening. Wasn't answering his phone, and to friends, a couple of friends who had called. But the knock came to the door. There's a guy standing there, and he said, "Chris, I'm here to see you about Celtic." This was not unusual. And so he sort of opened the door, and as he opened the door, the guy pushed past, and another man came in behind him, and then two more in quick succession. They were all dressed in dark clothing. They had baseball caps on, pulled down, scarves, or things pulled up to limit the amount of their face that could be seen. And very quickly, he said, "This is about your job." And he didn't mean the job at Casement Park. He meant the job in the Northern Bank. And the family were called downstairs, brought together, and they were told that Chris was going to be taken away for a period of hours, and that all they had to do was comply with what the men who were going to stay in the house asked of them. And if Chris did everything that was asked of him, then everything would be fine.
But, interesting point you bring out in the book, the family were made swear on a holy picture in the house. Will you elaborate on that?
So they said the people who had taken over the house lifted down a holy picture and asked them to swear over it that they would not do anything to try and raise the alarm. And as I say in the book, I'd never heard of this. But, you know...
You're obviously not a Catholic.
Is what I say in the book. It would tell people, we know this. We know all the signals that we send when we say things here. So I say that it would tell people an awful lot about me if I say I'd never heard of swearing on a holy picture, but I have heard about swearing on a Bible,
yes.
Swearing on your mother's life, all of those things. It all means the same thing, that if you believe in this, and if you give your word, then you've given your word, and you will not break your word. And that's what they were asked to do.
Camera switches to South Down, Loughlin Island now.
Chris is put into a car, and he's driven in a car. He doesn't know where he's going. He's taken outside. He's put into a car, and he's been driven to an unknown location. In the meantime, in Loughlin Island, Kevin and Karen McMullen, who live in a slightly remote or more remote bungalow than Chris's house, which is in the middle of a housing estate. So they're in their home, they're watching TV, and they hear a car. It's Sunday evening, and they don't usually have visitors at this time on a Sunday evening. And when Kevin gets up and goes to the door, there is a man standing in a high-vis vest. And he sees behind him, he can see a car that looks to have police markings on the side of it. And a similar thing. In this instance, he's told, one of the guys, there's two guys there, one of them's holding a clipboard. And he's told that there's been an accident and that they need to come inside. And he's given to understand that there has been a road accident and fatality. And he thinks that it's his sister, who he knows is out visiting relatives that day. As he comes back into the house, the men follow. And in this instance, unlike in the Ward house, a gun is produced. And very quickly, Kevin McMullen is grabbed from behind, a gun is put to his head. Karen is watching this unfold in front of her.
Karen is his
partner, wife, yeah. And so she sees this. This all happens very, very quickly. An awful lot of force is brought to bear. They're both down on the ground. They have people sitting on their backs, and their hands are being tied behind them.
With cables?
With cables, yeah, cable tied behind them. So this all happens really, really quickly, in a matter of moments between opening the front door and them lying down with their hands tied behind them.
But isn't Chris there by this stage?
No, he's not there. Well, where Chris is by that stage is perhaps moot. He's on his way. At a certain point, he's in the car and he's watching lights go past, and then he sees a sign for Loughin Island, and he knows that Kevin lives there, so he thinks, okay, I know what's happening now. They're taking me to Kevin's house. He's brought into the back of the house through the back door and left standing in the kitchen, which is in darkness, except for the fridge door, which is open, and that's the only light. He's made the stand looking into the fridge, and meanwhile, quite a number of men have come into the McMullins' house. They have dragged Kevin down the hallway into a room that's used for storage, and they're being quite violent. There's a knife. Karen sees a knife in the hands of one of the killers. He sticks it in the carpet, the point of it, as they're interrogating them, and she just refers to him ever after as the knife man. And so that's they're being told in the same way that the Ward family were being told that their house has been taken over. This is to do with Kevin's job, and that in this instance, the person who's going to be taken away is Karen. She's going to be taken from the house, and she's going to be held somewhere else. And Kevin is going to have to do something for these men who've taken over the house.
Could you just, for the audience, crystallise Karen's narrative when she finds herself in a forest all alone in the dead of night, frosty night?
So everything that I use first of all in that radio series and subsequently in the book is from Karen's testimony in court.
Yes.
So I went to the trial of the only person who was ever tried in connection with this, direct connection with the robbery, being Chris Ward. And I listened, and I was so struck, very particularly by Karen McMullin's testimony. So she was blindfolded. So she was told she had to be blindfolded before she was taken from the house. When she heard that, she then saw one of the men who had taken over the house produce a roll of masking tape. And she realized that when he said blindfolded, what he meant was tape up her eyes. She panicked and said, please, no, not that. They allowed her to go and find something. They said, have you got a woolly hat or a tea cozy even? So she went and found a woolly hat.
Charming, wasn't it?
Yeah, and she brought it in. And when she brought it in, they pulled it down over her face, and then they wound it round and round and round with the same masking tape. So for the next nearly 24 hours, she was in a woolen hat that was taped over and over. And that was how she experienced the next 24 hours. So everything that she recounted in court, she had picked up through listening and trying to divine what was going on. It was a remarkable testimony. And of all the people in this story, her ordeal was, I would say, the most barbaric.
In fact, living in Northern Ireland and working in Northern Ireland, we got a call one day, Brian Rowan and myself, who was the BBC security correspondent, and we were asked to go to West Belfast. We went to a pub, and we met a guy there who told us, we're travelling. We were put into a car, we were given dark glasses and that tape, and we were driven off. Now, I don't know what it was like for Karen, but for us, who were guilty of nothing, and like Karen had absolutely no reason to be treated accordingly, it was an extraordinary experience. And we were driving around for, I don't know how long we were driving. Eventually we arrived somewhere. We were actually taken like this down steps and into a basement. And at that point, we were allowed to take off the masks. But it was an extraordinary experience. So I can absolutely empathize and sympathize with what Karen must have felt at that moment in time.
And at the end of this, so there were a number of things that were she was told that she was going to be taken to a house where there would be a woman who would help look after her in the hours that she was away from Kevin. That proved not to be so. She realised as soon as she was brought into another house after being driven around, she was brought into another house and she realised straight away that there were 3 men present. And so all of these things were... there were a number of things that she was told that did not turn out to be so, and also there was just this terror at every moment.
Her big thing was bullets.
She was going to be shot. She was afraid she was going to be shot.
She thought she was the next person to be shot.
Yeah, and at the very, very end of the night, after the robbery had occurred, so Chris and Kevin were drilled by the guys who'd taken over their houses. They were drilled in what they had to do when they went into the cash centre, and then they were released at the end of that. But the last person to be released was Karen McMullen, and she was taken. She was made to put on a boiler suit, and she was put in another car, and she was driven. And she just thought, this is what they do when they kill you. This is how they do it. Mm-hmm. And she was driven to Drumkeira Forest, and she didn't know where she didn't know where she was, but that's where it turned out she was. She was then taken out of a car, walked into the forest, made to lie face down. The terror of that is indescribable, I would say.
We've got to keep moving, Glenn, because you have so much to cover now.
That's okay.
The instructions for Chris and Kevin, just briefly bring us through those.
It was dead simple. They were on the late shift, and which meant that they would be the ones when the bank had closed for the day, the cash centre was still operating. They would be the last, not the last two, but part of the last shift. They were to get rid of all the other members of staff in the cash centre. And they were then to, well, in the first instance, they were to fill up a holdall, which Chris actually had put his change of clothes in. When he was kidnapped, he was told to put his work gear in a holdall. So he went and got a holdall. That holdall he was to fill up with banknotes. It came to about £1.2 million that were to be put in there. He was to take those out of the bank in the holdall and walk down Wellington Street onto Queen Street, and somebody would meet him at a bus stop and would walk away with the holdall. So this was, it seems, a dry run.
Yes.
And then after that, if the police didn't descend, then a van was going to arrive, and that van was to be filled up with banknotes from
But the interesting thing about that van, from what Glenn writes, there was a young couple, and they came close to rumbling what was going on in that area at that point in time.
Well, I mean, I'm sure a whole lot of you know Wellington Street, from the side of the City Hall, just looking down on the Queen Street. So the van was parked there. It's a Monday night. It's just before Christmas. The street is lots of people, and it's not a wide street. So this van was parked there. And this young couple noticed, they just thought there was something strange, and it looked to them as though the guys in the van were wearing baseball caps and ginger wigs. And so they thought this was somewhat odd. But I got to say, I think that's odd. I mean, if you've done all of this to rob a bank, that you would sit with ginger wigs in a van right next to the bank. Anyway, apparently that's what was happening. And so they went to find a traffic warden, who then went and alerted the police. And the police came around, and by the time the police came around, they were about 10 minutes too late, and the van was away.
I had a friend who said he was done that in that area a week or two later, and there was a white van there. He thought the money was being given back.
Well, I've got to tell you, the little epilogue to this book was just before I finished the book, around about Christmas of 2023, would that be? 24, I can't remember, I'm losing my dates. I was walking down into town, down Dublin Road, on the Bedford Street, and then I looked across, and outside the bank, outside Danske Bank, there was a white van parked. And it was, I don't know whether they were putting stuff in or taking stuff out, but people were getting off the bus and they were walking around it. And I took a photograph of it, and it's in the book. And I was thinking, that's just the way these things happen.
Right. Oh, la condition de men, they call it, human condition. We say in South Armagh. It's de rigueur to see that in South Armagh. But now, inside the bank, I want you to paint the picture, because Chris and his colleague Kevin, they had to relabel the crates of money. Now, explain all that, will you?
So, Do I get 2 sentences for that one?
Yes.
So, okay. So the cash centre in the Northern Bank, I mean, there are several things. This is a book also about what's happened with banking, I think, as well as just being that robbery. It was chaotic. The cash centre, we like to think when we hand our money over in the bank that, you know, we're handing it over to responsible, that it's, you know, responsible human beings, and we trust banks, or we used to trust banks, but the cash centre was literally chaos. There were bits of broken furniture, there were old machines lying around, there were no windows, and there were piles of cash all over the place. Then also, new money coming in was in these cases, crates, and it had one particular tag on it. The only thing that distinguished those crates from waste paper was the colour of the tag. That's it. So what Kevin and Chris had to do was replace the tags on the crates of money with the tags that you used on crates of rubbish. That's all they had to do. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
Glenn is talking about the chaos in that area, but in reality, in the wake of all this, there was an investigation into the internal security, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And that was found to be highly deficient.
Well, it was highly deficient because it had been privatised, and it was the lowest common denominator, not unusual in privatisation. They put the security of the bank, which used to be people in livery, in uniform, people who were employed by the bank, employed on the same terms by the bank, and then it was put out to tender, and the company that won the tender was actually the company that was in charge of the cleaning of the bank, or had been up until then, and they took over security on condition that they would save £100,000 a year. So security was not quite what it had been, and in fact, a former member of the liveried Northern Bank security team had pointed this out on numerous occasions, including to Stormont, to MLAs, that this bank was pretty much wide open.
Mm. Now, almost immediately, the finger was pointed directly at the IRA, and not just by the Taoiseach, but by the Secretary of State and Hugh Ord, who was the Chief Constable, and all of that. Why was that so obvious, if it were obvious at all?
The robbery, it took there were 2 houses that were taken over. There were numerous vehicles that were involved in the robbery. There was the man who came walking down the street and lifted the bag. Sort of reasonably, about 30 people were involved in this robbery. A reasonable kind of estimation for how many people were involved in it. And it was very simply concluded that a degree of organisation, a high degree of organisation, must be involved. And it also has to be said that the robbery, despite the fact that the scale of it was off the scale, so it was £26.5 million, which was not only the biggest robbery at that time, cash robbery, on these islands. It was also, I didn't know there was a league table, but apparently it was the 10th largest in the world at that time. This was a huge, huge robbery. So not only was it was off the scale, but the nature of the robbery was actually quite familiar because there'd been a number of similar robberies.
Yes, tiger
kidnappings.
Yes,
you take somebody hostage, you threaten them or you threaten their family. You say to them, go into the bank, go into the whatever. There was a macro robbery, there was a cigarette heist, there were all of these big robberies, and they all bore the hallmarks of the
you draw
provisional
attention
IRA.
to, Glenn, to the fact that somebody was approached, a member of the banking staff was approached in one of the supermarkets by this person who wanted to know some details about the inner workings of that area of the bank.
Yeah, I mean, there was an awful lot. Subsequently, it was clear that this job had been talked about for quite some time. It was, so
everything sort of pointed to a high degree of organisation, and also where the robbery took place, how it took place. Everything also pointed to the fact that those similar robberies in the past made it highly likely that was a provisional IRA.
Throughout so much of this time, Kevin Mullen and Chris Ward were actually, according to what you wrote, in communication with the gang.
Yeah, so all the way through the day of the robbery, they were given phones, and the phones that they were given only had one number in them. And
Imagine that.
So they only had one number, and they were to take it in turns phoning the robbers. The man they were to phone was a man who had been putting on strange accents when he was in Kevin's house. So sometimes he would put on a Donald Duck voice. Sometimes he would put on a Scottish accent, Pakistani accent. You know, he was trying to disguise his voice. And so this was the guy they were to phone to report in. We have changed the seals. We are ready to bring the bag out with the hold all out. We are ready to do all these stages. So they had to keep reporting in. After the first phone call, you got to remember, this is 20 years ago. This is underground. This is in a basement. Reception wasn't great. And Kevin panicked because he couldn't get a signal to phone out. And thereafter, it was decided that Chris would make all the phone calls to the gang. He would leave the bank and go out and make phone calls. As he said, it would look odd if Chris, as the manager, acting manager, because the manager was away that week, if he kept leaving the bank. So they had to keep going out to make these phone calls to get the message for what was to happen.
The first break in tracking down some of this money came south of the border in Houston Station in Dublin. Is that correct?
It did, yeah. So as Eamonn said, almost straight away, the finger of suspicion was pointed at the provisional IRA, strenuously denied any involvement. And there were raids just before Christmas, farcical raids, where the police went into houses of people known to be in the IRA and came out with Christmas boxes. And so, £26.5 million, it filled a van twice the amount of money. And there seemed to be this supposition that had been broken up and put under Christmas trees. It seemed somewhat mad. But nevertheless, so apart from those raids, nothing had really happened. And then in February 2005, there were a series of arrests south of the border. And the first one...
And in Kilcoo.
And in Kilcoo, yes, that's right. Yes, it sort of started...
Yeah.
It started with that, with those arrests at Houston Station. And police Garda undercover team were watching a man called Don Bullman get into a 4x4 in Houston Station, and he had a hold-all. Lots of hold-alls in this story. As I say, it's a really...
Were they called Umbros?
Yeah, well, his was the one that Chris walked out with was an Umbro one, yeah. But it's a really important... There were some text messages found on Don Bullman's phone about having the right size of bag for what he was going to do that day. So if you're thinking of robbing anywhere, make sure you have the right hold-all with you. So he got into a car with this hold-all, and when the police raided, this is crucial, the bag was sitting next to him on the back seat of the car, and subsequently he said that the contents of it had nothing to do with him. So he was never charged for what they found.
You heard that story recently in Northern Ireland?
Yes, we had. So what was found inside the bag that he had was a Daz washing up powder box, and inside that was 95,000.
It washed whiter, didn't it?
It washed whiter, yeah. So it is. That's exactly what it is. It looked like, and there are lots of things. Like,
but walk us back a moment there.
Yeah.
There was a very interesting development in the PSNI RUC Recreational Centre in New Forge Lane in South Belfast. Yes.
Imagine.
So
So there's the dominoes go. And after Don Bullman's arrest and the guys who were with him, who were never charged with anything, which is why their names are not being said here, there were arrests all the way down to Cork, and larger amounts of money were found in Cork, and a huge number of several arrests, quite a number of arrests were made. And then just around the next day, there was this development where journalists in Belfast received a call to say that they should go to New Forge Lane. Did you get a call?
I wasn't there, no, thank God.
Okay, so
Not guilty.
they might be interested to go down to New Forge Lane, to what had once been the police social club and was now the New Forge Health and Recreation Club. That was used by people from the members of the PSNI, but was open to the public. More or less at the time they're arriving at the front gate, the people inside the New Forge Lane are getting a phone call to say there is a quantity of drugs hidden in your toilets. You might want to go down there. So they went down to the toilets, and it wasn't the quantity of drugs that was in there. It was £50,000 in Northern Bank notes.
As Shirmasini said, possibly the right answer to that one.
So the embarrassment to the PSNI was huge, but it looked as though these arrests were happening, and people with access to that place had decided that they could embarrass the police by putting some of the money. I think I'm right in saying those are the only certifiably banknotes that are certifiably Northern Bank from the robbery that have ever been found was the 50,000 that was in the police recreation club. I think I'm right in saying.
I'm sure an independent investigation is on the way to find how those £50,000 landed in that particular place. Now, Chris Ward went on holidays to Spain. Take us through that, because it was an interesting development there, wasn't there?
So Chris and Kevin were interviewed by the police as witnesses after the robbery, and at the trial, a lot of the tapes of the police interviews with Chris were shown, and it was pretty clear that soon after the robbery, he was being interviewed as a witness, but there was, you could, maybe it's hindsight, you can see this and hear this, he's sitting in court after all. It sounded as though there was a little bit of suspicion around his account. They kept cross-checking things. Whether they were doing that with Kevin, I can't say, because that was not shown in court. But
was it alleged the house was bugged? His house was bugged?
There was the suggestion was that the house had been bugged as well. So he went on holiday, and he was with a friend, and while he was on holiday, he was playing pool, and a couple of guys came up to them and sort of said, can we play a game of doubles? And they were playing pool. And then one of them said, by the way, we've got this investment scheme. Like, have either of you come into any money recently that you might like to?
As happens when you're on your holidays.
Yeah. So it was as ludicrous as that. Chris also went on TV and he gave an interview, BBC Northern Ireland, in January of 2005 after the robbery, to say that there was now a lot of gossip about him and suspicion around him, and he said this is entirely to do with who I am, where I'm from, my connections to Celtic, to Casement Park, and it's an...
Chris, Casement Park was raided.
Yes, Chris,
because he worked there.
Yeah. So, now he, I know his solicitor has said that he thought that Kevin was also going to be interviewed for that BBC NI programme, and that wasn't the case. Nevertheless, that programme went out in January 2005. And so at the time that he went on holiday, it was pretty clear that he was being looked at very closely as being involved in some way in the robbery. And he was, in fact, arrested in November 2005 and charged with kidnapping and robbery of the Northern Bank.
Yeah, so he ends up in court, and you sat in on quite a few of the...
Were you there?
Sittings. No, I wasn't. I did a lot of serious journalism in those days.
Whoa.
So anyhow, Judge McLaughlin,
Yep.
Rick,
Yeah.
was.
He didn't say, call me Rick, funny enough, when he came into court. That was...
Well, in South Belfast,
Yeah.
we knock about
Yeah.
together. We know
Yeah.
these people, you know. But anyhow, the long and the short of it was, I think he said that there was absolutely no smoking gun at the end of the day.
Well, what he
implicate
said, what was
Chris.
extraordinary about this was it was a diplock trial, so there is no jury, and
He didn't win the witness box, didn't he?
Chris didn't go
He wouldn't
into,
put the-
no, Chris didn't take the stand, and as was his right not to take the stand, but he. So you go in there and you think, well, why is there no jury? When did these come in? They came in because of terrorist-related offences. So that instantly tells you that that's what this is being considered as. So this is, by this stage, it's 2007. And that's what this is being considered as. So then the judge says, he says, we are not here to decide if an organisation was involved in this.
Yes.
So, okay. So it's just Chris. They're only interested in Chris Ward. At no stage did anybody ask Chris Ward what he did with the money, £26.5 million. At no point did anybody make any kind of conjecture about what Chris Ward might have done with £26.5 million. So nobody's asking about the money. Nobody's asking whether there's an organisation involved. And you're thinking, well, why is this person sitting here? So what is this about? And so very quickly, it turned into, are you going to read?
No, you are.
Oh, I am. All right.
But his solicitor, Niall Murphy, is
Yes,
that correct?
that's Niall Murphy, yeah.
He described it as Cafe-esque, as one says in
Cafe-esque.
West Belfast, very common, you know. Cafe-esque, isn't that how he
Kafkaesque.
described it?
He said it was Kafkaesque. Yeah,
said,
he
yeah.
said, and I'm sitting in court, and by the time I arrived in there, there was a lot of speculation, and other journalists, obviously less serious than Eamonn, who were around, were telling you things about how this was going to pan out. People told you, were telling you what's going to happen, and they told you, the house was bugged, and there was this, and there was this. So you went in there expecting that you were going to hear evidence. And it was a circumstantial case, which is, as Niall Murphy said, there's nothing wrong with a circumstantial case if the circumstantial evidence is strong. If the circumstantial evidence is not strong, then you don't have a case. And all of this, talking at the very beginning of this about the rota, that Chris and Kevin were paired together on this rota, everything hinged on the trial on the fact that the person who prepared the rota was Chris Ward. And that on the Friday before the robbery, when the rota was decided, changes were made that ensured that he and Kevin McMullen were on the same rota together on the Monday. That's what the trial hinged on. And it was also said that Kevin had had no sight of this before the house was taken over, before the Monday. And it was fairly easily proven in the trial that quite a number of people other than Chris Ward had sight of that, including Kevin, who walked past it on his way out, leaving a little bit early on the Friday afternoon.
And people sent home.
And people were sent, yeah.
home.
Workers
were sent home early.
Cleaners were coming in coming in afterwards. There were lots of people who could see this rota. If lots of people can see the rota, then there are lots of people who could have passed that information on. And in that case, you cannot circumstantially say that this person, and only this person, could have been responsible for it. Now, I went into the trial, and this is only me talking, so I don't have to read. I went into that trial thinking I knew what had happened. And then I was sitting there, and as I think probably most of us would like to think, that when you go into trial, you want other people tried to the same standard that if it was you sitting there, you would like to be tried yourself. You would like the case to be proven, and for there to be absolutely no question of doubt. And within, a couple of days of sitting in there, you just thought, there's no case here. There's no case.
Now,
Sorry.
I think we have dug into it quite a lot, and you can still read it. Like, it's available, guys, if you want to read it,
Please.
But I'd like you to read the last two paragraphs, which I think rather startled me.
I don't want to spoil the...
Yeah, startled me. I'm
Okay.
speaking for myself.
Yeah, okay.
But anyway, so I'd like you to read them.
I don't mind reading. Yeah, I'll read them.
I'm inviting you to read them.
Okay,
You
but
don't
this
have
is the end. This is the end of the book. So, as was their right, the defence at Chris Ward's trial made the decision not to put him into the witness box. There is no way of knowing whether the prosecution would have probed him further on some of his evidence, whether, say, they would have asked how his characterisation of himself as the wee man only interested in football and family squared with his involvement in Ogra Sinn Féin, formerly Sinn Féin Youth, in the late 1990s, when he and other party members were in the studio audience for an RTE Current Affairs programme. So Chris's characterisation of himself, he spoke of himself as, I'm just a wee man who carries keys. I'm only interested in football, in Celtic. That's all I'm interested in. I write that as a former attendee at Socialist Workers' Student Society meetings. I'm pretty sure I never paid my subscription, and a carrier of its placards at pickets and demos. It does not tell you everything about who I am 4 decades on, but it maybe tells you something worth the knowing. None of which is to question the verdict of the 9th of October 2008. Like I say, Chris Ward is the one person here who has a judge's word that he did not rob the Northern Bank. Beyond that, what can I say? That the IRA definitely did do it? No. But I'll tell you this for sure. Nobody else did.
I said I was a bit startled by that, because here was a guy who was effectively cleared. Mm-hmm. And I would be nervous, I have to say, professionally, editorially, revisiting that area, highlighting that dimension to the individual. That's just a personal thing as a practicing journalist. Mm-hmm. Anyhow,
I love that as a practicing journalist.
Glenn, all I want to say is thank you for giving me your time and allowing me to question you.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much indeed.
And I hope I wasn't too hard on you.
Yeah.
I used to wear my hair like that.
Did you?
When I had
Was
some.
that when you had some? Yeah.
A rather cool, a long time ago.
That's okay.
Thank you
think I
very
remember
much
seeing you on the
indeed.
TV.
And I'm in the chair, and I think if you want to ask some questions, let me ask for questions. Is that all right? Anyone wants?
Hiya.
I know you said about being a practicing journalist, you wouldn't, but I remember watching a documentary and one of the things that struck me.
Speak up, please.
I remember watching a documentary about the job.
Hold on, there's a.
Hello?
Hiya.
Yep. I remember watching a documentary and one of the things that struck me was another journalist basically said in as close a possible way that Chris did it, but I haven't heard anything. Was there anything that started to point in Chris's direction?
There were a number of details about it. So I described the takeover of the houses. So they were very different. The takeover over the houses. There were no guns produced in the Ward house. The family were allowed to watch TV, watch movies. I believe maybe Pirates of the Caribbean. But they were pretty much allowed to come and go. And while the kidnappers, robbers were in the house, the level of force that was used to take over the McMullen house, the level of force in particular that Karen McMullen was subjected to were very different. Guns were produced.
The holy picture saved.
Yeah, well, there you go. The holy picture. That was it. So there were differences, and there were a few inconsistencies in those police interviews and some of the telling of what had happened. So that was really, I think, where that began. But it is really simple. You know, you go into court and you have to prove that someone did something. If they didn't, then they didn't. And there was very little attempt. Well, I would say very little attempt. There was very little of a convincing nature to say that any of this stood up, because for everything that was suggested, I mean, on the one hand, you think about this: the McMullins were in a more remote area, so you could say you could use force, you could make a lot of noise. Nobody's going to hear that. The ward house is in a terrace. There are houses, people on the other side of that, so you have to maybe do that differently. You could always posit something else that says that's why that happened in that way. A lot was made about the calls that were made, the fact that Chris kept going out to make the calls, but when that was in court, this suggestion that Kevin couldn't get a signal, had panicked, didn't want to keep going out. So that, if there's a plausible other version, then the case does not stand up.
Are you all happy? Yes, go ahead, ma'am.
What in particular piqued your interest? You know, the way people write about things, but it's because something clicks in your brain.
I was in Belfast City Centre on the night. Probably half this room was in Belfast City Centre that night. And when I heard about the robbery the next day, I thought to myself, I couldn't believe that had happened. You know, like a bit like the Louvre. You think, really? That happened like that, right there, and in front of everybody. If only we'd known what we were looking at. So there was that, and I was thinking about it, and also as we were talking about at the very beginning, the particular moment that it happened, I thought it was an outrageous robbery in the first place, but the fact that the IRA were involved in it, then why did that happen? Who knew about it? And what did that say for where we were politically at that moment? So those reasons. And then when the trial was coming up, I was talking to a friend, and I thought that I might.
Claire Delargy.
It was Claire Delargy.
She
Yeah,
worked in the BBC.
Yeah, and her husband Jimmy Delargy. Yeah,
of UTV.
Yeah, and Claire had suggested to me that it might be interesting to go along. I might be interested in going along to the trial. She and I had made a couple of TV things together, and that there might be a film in this, and that's what I went there to do, was to write a feature film. And then when the trial collapsed, then I sort of shelved that for a while, but I did think there was always a story there. And sorry, if I could just put into this as well, the month after the robbery, at the end of January 2005, Robert McCartney was murdered. Robert McCartney was murdered in Belfast City Centre, and that is absolutely essential to understanding what happened in the aftermath and the hunt for the money and the pressure that was brought to bear on Sinn Féin and the eventual decision of the IRA to dump all weapons in July 2005. So all of that, yeah, so all of those things come in. But Eamonn is sitting forward in his seat, so I think I ran too long again with that answer.
I'm watching Shannon. And
Shannon, okay, we got to go.
Well, as you can imagine, it's quite a conversation starter. We could talk about it all day, but unfortunately we are out of time. We do have copies of the Northern Bank job here, if you want to take one with you today. Otherwise, you can order it on the Libraries and I website. But can we give Glenn and Eamonn a big thank you?